welcome to Things Are Not What They Seem live stream. First, I'd like to thank anybody that takes the time to listen to our point of view, listen to us go over some articles that might be interesting, which is what I'm going to do now. I found an interesting article I thought I'd like to read to you. I haven't read it yet myself. I figured I'd just kind of share it as I go through this. So, it's entitled Moses was probably on drugs when he experienced God in a burning bush. There are some pretty intense moments. Let me make sure my sound is there. Pretty intense moments. Let me turn this up a little bit. Okay, how's that testing? Okay, much better. There are some pretty intense moments in the Bible. Bushes erupt in fire, lightning screeches from the sky, and loud symphonic sounds lead prophets and saints to sacred events. Moses had several experiences in which he encounters God in an intense sensory fashion. But was he really experiencing all of these things, or was Moses on drugs? When it comes to the sensitive subject of drug use in the Bible, Dr. Benny Shannon of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem is the leading expert. He claims that specific plants available on the Sinai Peninsula could have created a hallucinogenic effect when consumed together, extremely similar to the Amazonian tradition of ayahuasca tea. He has used ayahuasca himself and believed it can open the mind to a religious experience like no other. Dr. Shannon makes it very clear that he wants to retain respect for the Jewish and Christian faiths. Publications such as The Guardian have misrepresented his work in the past, touting that Moses was high headline and twisting the professor's words. Terms such as drug, trip, high, and stoned are ones I have nothing to do with and which I do not condone, Dr. Shannon stated. The research is highly controversial at this point, theoretic, but offers an interesting and plausible explanation of many of the events in the Bible. And I agree, I've always, little digress for a minute, I've always thought that this ancient alien stuff was bull, that it really was sacred knowledge that they acquired from the use of plants and psychedelics and stuff like that. But let's continue with this article. The effects of the plants which may explain a few very important biblical moments. It goes on to say, Dr. Shannon claims that two of the major events that most people know Dr. Shannon claims that two of the major events that most people, sorry about this, I'm turning this down. Okay. The effects of the plants may explain a few very important biblical moments. Dr. Shannon claims that two of the major events that most people know Moses for in the Bible occurred while he was possibly under the influence of hallucinogenics. Those events are the receiving of the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai and the encounter with the burning bush with which he had a conversation. He also experienced things throughout the book of Exodus that include bright light and the sound of trumpets, visual and auditory sensations that can be experienced through drug use. You see a picture here of him kneeling down and looking up at the sky. He's tripping, I mean, seriously, you never know. Most experiences common side effects of someone who has taken Moses experienced common side effects of someone who has taken ayahuasca. Dr. Shannon came up with the hypothesis that Moses and his fellow Israelites were in an altered state of consciousness when they experienced God at Mount Sinai. According to Shannon, the effects of ayahuasca consumption can result in hallucinations, which can include seeing light and experiencing intense religious feelings. Shannon posts that experiencing seeing a bright while almost feeling deep religious connections can give one the illusion of seeing God. The use of hallucinogens The use of hallucinogens may have united the people of Israel. Although his theory has been somewhat divisive for the religious community, Shannon believes that the use of hallucinogens may have been a uniting factor for the early people of Israel. He stated that opinion in an interview with Israel Radio. As far as Moses on Mount Sinai is concerned, it was either a supernatural cosmic event, which I don't believe, or a legend, which I don't believe either. Or finally, and this is very probable, an event that joined Moses and the people of Israel under the effects of narcotics. The two plants found on the Sinai Peninsula are also used in ayahuasca ceremonies. Ayahuasca contains two key ingredients, DMT and MAO, that give its hallucinogenic effects. Two plants in the Sinai region contain the same ingredients. The Acacia bush contains DMT, and the Paganum harmala bush contains MAO inhibitors, is what it is. The ancient Israelites would have access to both critical plants. Now, what it is the bush contains DMT, but when you drink it, your body doesn't absorb it that way unless it's mixed with a mono and some kind of, I can't say the words, but some type of inhibitor. So when those two plants are mixed, now when you drink the substance, the DMT can get absorbed into your system, and it extends it from a 30-minute experience if you smoke it to a 8 to 12 hour experience, from what I've read. Much more involved, much more intense. It's more of a journey than just a quick experience. There are always very specific preparations made for ayahuasca ceremonies, and similar preparations have actually been described in the book of Exodus in the Bible in relation to the Mount Sinai events. Drugs can be instruments to develop religious understanding. I believe that. In the Amazon region, ayahuasca is used in religious ceremonies. Although ayahuasca, along with plants used by the early Israelites, is a mind-altering substance, Shannon is adamant that using it can be an experience that brings a deeper understanding of God. There is no doubt. If you've ever used mushrooms, LSD, mescaline, you know that this is true. You know that you can sit there and just look at a flower and feel the wonder of God. There's no doubt about that. The plants are universally regarded as sacred, even divine, and held to be the source of true knowledge. Now let me read this again. The plants were universally regarded as sacred, even divine, and held to be the source of true knowledge. Now, it's interesting it says that because, like I said at the beginning, I've always theorized that the Mayans got most of their information about the cosmos from the ayahuasca and the plants that they were ingesting from that other dimension, from those entities that I think took advantage of them. But I believe that's where they got their information. If you want to call those ancient aliens, they were ancient aliens from another dimension. And you were able to tune in them through the use of ayahuasca, but that's a whole other subject. That's my personal belief, is that yes, the plants are the source of true knowledge in the universe, and it can be accessed by using those plants in certain ways. Okay, anyway. The plants were universally regarded as sacred, even divine, and held to be the source of true knowledge in the very foundation the cultures in question. In the very foundation of the cultures in question. So everything that they lived, danced, exercised, believed was all this knowledge that they had received from the use of these plants and the hallucinogenic dances and experiences. And that does include human sacrifice. So a lot of those things took a very dark turn, which we'll talk about sometime. Anyway, their consumption is a lifelong engagement. So it's a lifestyle. It's a lifelong engagement. So once you start taking in these plants and religious ceremonies, it becomes a lifelong journey. Because you want to find out more. You want to see it deeper. You want to experience God closer. 1 second. I need a drink. I'm going to see the grape here. Sorry about this. Okay, where were we? So it says, entheogens pop up throughout religious history. From Siberia to Mexico, drugs were used in ancient religious ceremonies to gain a better connection to the spiritual world. The term entheogen, that's what it looks like, was coined by ethnobotanist in 1979 as a way to better describe the use of drugs for religious reasons. The definition of entheogen is that which causes God to be within an individual. So it's that which causes God to be within an individual. So some drugs are considered entheogens. Some of the oldest religious texts in the world are the ancient Hindu Vedas. They mention a drug called soma, whose identity remains unknown. However, it is described as a plant made into a drink that would give those who consumed it otherworldly power, as well as improved communication with the deities. I believe that. Let's read that again. Some of the oldest religious texts in the world are the ancient Hindu Vedas, Vedas. They mention a drug called soma, the same drug mentioned in, I think it was Brave New World, whose identity remains unknown. However, it is described as a plant made into a drink that would give those who consumed it otherworldly power, as well as improved communication with the deities that were in that world that they go to when they take this drug, when they tune into this other dimension, is what I call it. Dr. Shannon put together a groundbreaking theory about psychoactive plants in the Bible. Dr. Shannon received his PhD in experimental psychology from Stanford University and is a professor of psychology at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He wrote a book about his numerous research experiences with a drug called ayahuasca, called Antipodes of the Mind. He became well known for his biblical entheogen hypothesis, which laid out the argument that Moses was under the influence of psychoactive drugs during very important moments in the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, just because if Moses was, does not take away from the validity of those experiences. It doesn't mean, and I think this is where people might have a problem. I'm not sure he says this, but I'm sure he agrees, is just because Moses may have been on ayahuasca doesn't mean the experience didn't really happen. Of course it happened, but those drugs were, they like you said, it allows God to be within you. It opens doors so you can experience those type of things that you can't experience in the normal world of just working and living and trying to get by. These plants offer great knowledge, great wisdom, and they offer the ability to go places and to experience different types of realities or dimensions. That's what I believe. And these plants like ayahuasca allow God to be within you. So it allows that to happen. However you like want to put that into words, it's impossible. When some people experience these things like ayahuasca, they come back and they can keep a pencil and pen right next to their bed, but their experience is impossible to put into words that fit into this reality. Anyway, how these plants affect the human body. The chemicals present in ayahuasca can make a person see, hear, smell, feel, or taste things that aren't really there, or cause the person to experience things differently from how they are in reality. The ingredient dimethyltryptamine, DMT, is not orally active because there is a compound in the digestive tract that destroys it, called monoamine oxidase, MAO. Because the ayahuasca tea contains MAO inhibitor, the hallucinogenic DMT can then enter the circulatory system, can be absorbed into the brain. Wonder where you heard that before. There is little concrete proof that hallucinogenic mushrooms were used in the Sinai region. So that doesn't look like they used mushrooms. They used ayahuasca. I've never used ayahuasca or DMT, so I couldn't tell you if mushrooms and DMT or ayahuasca are similar. I'm sure they are, though. From what I've read, that they appear to be the same. They appear to take it to the same type of place or allow you to experience the same type of thing. The studies done by Dr. Benny Shannon focused on bushes with potentially psychedelic properties, but some people theorize that mushrooms also played a role in prehistoric culture and early spirituality. However, the evidence to prove the various mushroom claims is sparse, especially for the Jesus was a mushroom theory. I never heard that one before. There have been reports of mushroom consumption in the Sahara Desert region around 7,000 years ago, probably 7 years ago too, but nothing specific indicating their use in the Sinai region. Okay, Shannon's research on the use of psychoactive plants in religious history doesn't affect his respect for religion. There you go. So it says Shannon's research on the use of psychoactive plants in religious history doesn't affect his respect for religion. I agree. I agree. I think it allows religion to prosper within you. It allows God to prosper within you. I think it enables you to be more of a spiritual religious person if you use those substances in the proper manner. Anyway, if anyone can claim to be an expert on ayahuasca, it's Dr. Benny Shannon. He has participated in around 160 ayahuasca ceremonies for the purpose of researching the effects on the body and mind. And I thought dog training was the job for life. That's the job for life. While some might feel uncomfortable with the idea that key biblical figures were under the influence of intoxicants, Dr. Shannon sees it very differently. When The Guardian posted articles that painted his research as disparaging to Moses and significant moments in the Bible, he wrote back to clear some things up. This is quotes, I would like to assure you that I have the deepest respect for Moses, the Jewish tradition, and religious faith in general. As stated in my book, The Antipodes of the Mind, the most important effect the experience with ayahuasca have had on me as a person was making me understand the dimension of the holy. It's a good way to put it. Shannon considers the effects to be neither good nor bad. It depends on the individual, and I agree with that. Any hallucinogenics work that way. In his letter to the Garden, Dr. Shannon defends his research on the hallucinogenic drugs from the Sinai region. While some people have serious doubts, he believes that the drugs, cognitive dissonance, he believes that the drugs can be a force for good and a positive part of people's religious lives. Psychoactive agents are not good or bad in themselves. Rather, their value depends on their usage, just like a gun, just like anything. A pencil, it can be good or bad. What comes out of a pencil, the writing, the words can be good or bad depending on how it's used. Same with a typewriter, same with a computer, same with a gun, same with psychoactive agents. Anyway, in spite of Shannon's theory, many Bible verses take a hard stance on drug use. Now, here we go. It's the definition. Before I even read this, I would say it has a lot to do with the definition of drug use. You wouldn't consider sacred plants drug use necessarily. Drug use can be characterized as something that's not good for you and causes bad things. Now, that's just my guess on the differentiation. And who determines that? Usually the government through selective prohibition, but we're not talking about that. Anyway, although there is no specific mention in the Bible of drugs of any kind whatsoever, mainly because most are either modern creations, there you go, or have modern names, religious scholars point out that the Bible is still very clear regarding drug use. One line of reasoning involves the mandate, which comes up many times through the text, that citizens should not disobey laws. Since there are laws against drug use in most countries today, that would mean that drug use is out of the question for Christians. I don't know that I agree with that. I think he means don't disobey laws, that unless they disrespect, my cat just bit me, sorry about that, unless they disrespect religion or Jesus, or they inhibit your ability to exercise your religious rights and your experiences with God, then I think the Bible would condone the use of those substances. Anyway, Um, One of the reasonings behind, although there is no specific mention in the Bible of drugs of any kind whatsoever, mainly because most are either modern creations or have modern names, religious scholars point out that the Bible is still very clear regarding drug use. One line of reasoning involves the mandate, which comes up many times throughout the text, that citizens should not disobey laws. Since there are laws against drug use in most countries today, that would mean that drug use is out of the question for Christians. Okay, so that's the article. Again, it was about, talked about Moses and the fact he was probably on drugs, namely DMT and ayahuasca, when he experienced God in a burning bush. I've always suspected this. I've talked about it. I've thought about it. I mean, I thought all of them, not Moses in particular, but any of these guys that had these religious experiences, I believe they're real. But I think they were also the use of the sacred plants and the ability that they had to allow God to be within you, as it's put in this article, is what's happening. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for spending the time. I just wanted to bring that up, read this article, put that out there in the universe that things are. Even the Bible is not what it seems. It seems that it's always left up to man's interpretation, what they tell us it is or what it means. Even in the translation of an ancient text to our language, there are instilled altered meanings or deceptive meanings of what that text really means. So, I mean, it's all around you. It's always going to be around you. Pray, trust your instincts, pray to God, be kind to each other, and remember the golden rule: do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Thank you again for watching or listening. If things are not what they seem, please like, share, and subscribe. Have a good evening. Let's see what we can do here. Let's do this. And what we're going to talk about in the future, probably tomorrow night maybe, is the gun laws again, because I'd like to talk about this Colorado thing where they have passed legislation saying that it's illegal for anyone to. All right, I guess we're back on. It says the OBS disconnected. I hope it's still streaming. But what I was saying is, it's interesting that that happened right then. What I was saying is, I want to talk about the really, really, really weird, really weird. So here we come. All right, have a good night. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace.